Greetings, viewers. Eric the Car Guy here, back again with another live show where I sometimes butcher your names and answer your automotive questions. This is Eric the Car Guy Answers Questions Live, number 19. Pretty cool. We've done 19 of these so far. A few things before we get started. Number one, the questions will be taken from my Google Plus page. So if you wish to have your questions answered during the show, or if you've already posted your questions, that's where I'm going to be taking the questions from. I cannot see the questions posted to the actual YouTube video, so please keep that in mind. I'm not going to be answering those questions. Also, questions posted after this session is already done, after the video and things. So after 7:30 this evening, I'm not going to be answering those questions posted to that Google Plus thing. However, 24/7, 365 days a year, EricTheCarGuy.com. That's where to go. So if you have automotive questions, I don't get to them during the show, I would ask that you go to EricTheCarGuy.com. There's a welcome video. It tells you about all the cool stuff. Aside from that, I go there about 3 days a week to answer questions on the forum. So, you know, and it's not just me. There's lots of other smart people there that know more stuff than I do that also are very, very helpful there. So if you don't get your question answered, you're not out of options. Now, let's see. I already told you about all that stuff. Let's go. Oh, now I need to show you something really cool. Oh, and the other thing is, if you miss this week's show, the next show will be on June 4th. I screwed that up in the last show, but I wrote it down this time. So June 4th, 7 p.m., same bat time, same bat channel. Anyway, check this out. I have to actually look at it. All right, look, new Eric the Car Guy T-shirts. Yes. Well, here's an easier way to show them to you. These are awesome. They're 100% cotton. That's the back. I'm wearing one myself. Absolutely love it. These are only going to be available for a limited amount of time. And the boys' shirts are $21, and the girls are $22, in case you were wondering. There will be a link in the description. There's also a link on the homepage of EricTheCarGuy.com. You can go there, click on that link. Once again, only available for a limited time. The girls cost more. I don't know, maybe they need more material up top. I'm going to actually take a little more time during the show since I, took your time there to tell you about these T-shirts. But I got to tell you, I really like mine, and I feel cool and dirty. So, off to your questions. As I said, posted to the Google Plus page. I kind of randomly go through and just answer them, but I'm not going to take up any more of your time telling you I'm not going to answer your questions or sell your T-shirts. So let's get started. I'm going to start at the top today. We have Bill Buckley. I have a 2009 EX Honda Odyssey with an intermittent side-to-side steering wheel vibration from 60 to 70 miles per hour for the last 40,000 miles. The tires were balanced 10 times, including road force. Rims and tires are true, lug nuts torqued, pressure is right, alignment and Michelin's done at 52,000 miles and 96,000 miles. The ball joints, tie rod, rack bushing, struts, CV joints, and wheel bearings are all good and tight. The transmission fluid was changed every 30,000 miles with Honda Fluid. Thank you for the great videos. Well, Bill, it sounds like you've really been taking care of your van. Good for you. But there's one thing that I think the speed actually says what I believe the problem to be, and I think you got a problem with an inner CV joint. They usually show up at about that speed, and what you'll find is it won't happen all the time. As you said, it was sometimes. So what will happen is, like, you're going at that speed, like 65, 70 miles an hour, and you're driving straight. Everything's fine. But the minute you go and turn it, that's when you start to get that little bit of vibration. But then you straighten it back out, and everything's fine. That is almost classic inner CV joint problem. Now, trying to figure out which side it is a little bit difficult. What I would do is I would take the axle itself and try to push up and down on the inner joint, well, on the axle, and I would observe the inner joint and look for which side seemed to have the most play, and I would guess and replace that axle. It just, like, and then go out and try and see if that fixed it. It's kind of a guess. I mean, sometimes it's really loose, and you can say, yeah, that's the bad one, but not always. In fact, I cover that in an article in my on my website. I've got an article on diagnosing vibrations, and driveline vibrations are one of those things. Suspension parts, alignment, almost never, ever cause vibrations. They might make a vibration worse that you have, but vibrations are caused by cyclical movements, things that are spinning. So if you have a vibration driving down the road, forget about suspension parts. I'm not saying don't check them, but they're not prime suspect. It's something that's spinning that's causing the problem. In this case, I think you got an inner CV joint issue. Right below him, I saw this question earlier and I wanted to answer this because this is kind of a good question and it gets into some performance aspects. Jose Perletta, or yeah, sorry. Hey Eric, performance-wise, would you recommend installing a dry sump oil system into a fully built 95 to 96 Toyota Supra with a 2JZ engine with aftermarket performance upgrades? Now, for those of you not familiar with what a dry sump is, we first need to talk about what a wet sump is. A wet sump is just about any car that's out there that you drive, that you buy off the car lot, whatever, has a wet sump system. And what that is, it's got an oil pan, it's got a pickup tube, sort of like a mosquito's mouth sticking down inside that oil pan. And the oil pump basically draws that oil from the oil pan and distributes it throughout the internals of the engine, and therefore your engine is lubricated. What is a dry sump? Well, a dry sump is a separate container for your oil. Now there's still a pickup down in the bottom of the oil pan, but the oil pan does not hold the oil. It sucks it away to another container, and then that oil is pressurized. There's like different stages in that, and I won't get into all that. But then that oil is then used to lubricate the engine. Now, why did they do this? The reason they did this was because in racing is mainly the reason why they did it. Performance applications. In those applications, you have a lot of movement. And when I say a lot of movement, you're either doing one of two things. Say you're at the drag strip. You've got extreme forces. When you hit the gas and you're launching forward, all that oil goes back to the back of the pan. And yes, there's baffles and things that they can put in there, but it's much easier to use a dry sump. Say you're in racing and you're cornering really hard. Well, all that oil inside the pan is going up to one side or the other, and it will starve the engine for oil because that pickup is just sitting there sucking air. There's nothing for it to suck. So they came up with this dry sump system. So to answer your question, Jose, ask yourself, are you going to be driving like a maniac? Or I should put it like this, are you going to be using this at the track or something of that nature? If that's the case, then I say yes, install a dry sump. If you're just having fun driving your cool Supra around, do you really need it? Probably not, but it's extreme cornering and those G-forces that are going to cause the oil pan or the oil in the pan to move to one side or the other and starve it for oil. You might consider, instead of doing that, I'm pretty sure there's something available for this. It's a performance car. Look for a different oil pan that maybe has some baffles on the inside of it. I mentioned that earlier. That's what they did. Instead of a dry sump pan, in some cases, they just have different baffles inside the oil pan to help keep the oil contained in a certain area. That's something you might consider. So how much money do you want to spend is kind of the question that I would put back to you. Let's move on. I want to try to get to as many questions as possible in this particular session. All right, we have Tyrone Jackson, re-ring jobs. What is your opinion on the cost effectiveness of a re-ring job? I have done full rebuilds, but no re-ring jobs. I have a 1997 Honda CR-V with an apparent piston slap and thinking of doing a re-ring with new pistons to help with the slap. May also have ring wear issues, so hoping this will improve these problems and give me a nice life extension on the engine. Is honing that important to new rings? Good question. Yes, it is important because that's what helps seat the rings in so that they last a good long time. But you also have to consider it's not just pistons that wear. It's also the bore that they're in. In fact, if you measure it, you'll find that it's sort of got a taper to it. It's probably got a lot more wear at the top and the middle than it does at the bottom. The bottom probably has no wear in the cylinder. But in the middle, mainly where the piston lives, where it's moving up and down inside the engine, that's what's also going to wear. So the cylinder wall is going to wear equal to the piston. So you can put new pistons and new rings in, but if you don't address the cylinder itself, you're kind of doing half the job. And if you go into it knowing that, and you're happy with that, and you can live with yourself, fine, do it. One thing about Hondas, though, bearings are going to be tricky, replacing the bearings, because Honda's bearings are color-coded, and you have to measure everything out and know what size bearing you're going to need before you actually go in there. So as you're doing this job, that's something to be considered. You're going to have some measuring skills to find out what size bearings that you need that would be appropriate for your rebuild. That's going to be more challenging than the pistons and the rings. Personally, if you were going to go that far, if you were going to go to that degree, send it to the machine shop. Have them go through it and check it out and see if it's worth it. But I will say this. You say you have piston slap. On a 97 CRV, that's a B series engine. Dual overhead cam has a timing belt. Now, one thing I've found particularly on the B series engine is if you have a loose timing belt, that thing will rattle like crazy. And the reason for this is I call it cam chunking. So the engine's trying to rotate. It's got two cams on the top. And one cam is for the exhaust, one cam is for the intake. At least from my perspective, that's where I'm sitting. And as they rotate, those cam lobes come and they depress the rockers for the valve springs and everything. So there's a certain amount of spring pressure that cam has to overcome as it rotates. Now once it gets past it, on the other side of that, it's basically being pushed back in the opposite direction. So in other words, that cam starts out, instead of a nice smooth turning motion, it does this. It's like, especially with a loose timing belt, and you get two of them doing that, sort of chunking around like I said, it'll rattle like crazy, especially the distributor. I've had distributor noise from this kind of thing. What I would do before you start digging in, make sure your timing belt's tight. Make sure it's like banjo tight. I mean, don't crank on the tensioner so much. You'll create noise and you'll wear everything out prematurely. The proper way to do it is to put it in top dead center, loosen the bolt for the tensioner that comes through the front of the timing cover. I put my hand on the exhaust cam, and I rotate the engine about a quarter turn or so, and you'll feel the timing belt get tighter and tighter as you do this. Then reach down, tighten the tensioner bolt, and then rotate it around and see if you've got like that movement. Between the two cams, you can sort of see if you've got a lot of play there. You don't want a lot of play there. You want it to be, I call it banjo tight. That's the term that I've read a lot. Do that and see if you still have engine noise. And then do a good oil change with, I would say, conventional oil and something that old. Sometimes using synthetics can make an engine noisier. Not sure what you're running there, but sometimes that can happen. Not saying all the time, but sometimes. So try conventional oil, try checking your timing belt before you go there. And actually, if you have to go that far, man, why not just get a used or a remanufactured engine, just drop it in. I mean, if you want to go through all that trouble and all that stuff and you enjoy that kind of work, great. But if you're looking for reliability, if you're looking for something to last, just go with a remanufactured unit. Have the warranty be on somebody else's shoulders rather than yours, and just do a really good installation, a really good swap. But as I said, if you're into that kind of thing, go for it. I mean, enjoy it. Enjoy the work, because that work can be very rewarding, especially when you turn a key and everything works like it's supposed to. However, it's your worst nightmare when just the opposite happens. You turn a key, you got a noise, it starts to bang and rattle, maybe scatters all over the road on your first trip out of the driveway. It has happened, and it wouldn't be the first time if it happened to you. So consider that. And consider, it sounds like you've got some skills. I mean, you said you've done these full rebuilds before, that type of thing. I believe you. Just saying, be careful. So I hope that addresses your question. And we get these almost all the time over the forum. I hear this a lot. Jarrett Palmer has a 1995 Honda Civic idle issue. It has a 1.6 non-VTEC engine. It has a K&N cold air intake on it. After driving for a little while, when I take it out of gear, it tends to bog down and start gasping for air, almost like a vacuum leak, though I can't seem to find one. Any suggestions? Some other time I'll go into quote-unquote cold air intakes, but we won't do that here. We'll just address your idle issue. In fact, I have an entire article I've written, and some of it specifically towards Honda idle issues, over at my website. Just go there, click on that. I'm not saying, do that now, and I'm not going to answer your question. What I'm saying is this Honda idle problems. And here's what I find, and here's what I'd like you to check for. A lot of times when a Honda has an idle problem, one of the first things people do is they go for that idle adjustment screw on the throttle body. I want to smack their hands. I do. The reason why they put a sealer on top of that thing is so that you do not mess with it. And basically that's like putting a Band-Aid on when you need surgery. That's not how you handle an idle problem. You just don't go straight for the idle screw. Don't do that. Fix the underlying issue. In your case, if somebody did adjust that screw, they could have misadjusted it so much that the computer cannot find its base idle. And it may be that your idle air control valve is trying to hunt around to try to figure out where the heck it is, because it doesn't understand why there's either too much or too little air passing through the throttle body. It just doesn't get it. It's like, why is the RPM so low? That's why it's taking so long to figure it out. That's what I normally see in those situations. So I would check that idle screw. And of course, check the normal things. Like you said, you can't find any vacuum leaks, but vacuum leaks are another huge issue with those. Let's see, that's a 95, so it may have a fast idle valve on it that may be having an issue. That could also be contributing. Once again, that's in that idle article, and there's actually a little video I did about it. And the last thing is the idle air control valve itself could be bad. I usually check those by taking like the handle of a screwdriver and smacking on the valve itself just to see if the idle changes, and if it does change, I begin to suspect it. A lot of people like to clean those, and they claim it works great. Sometimes it does. I'm not saying it doesn't. Personally, as a technician, when you find an idle control valve that's acting up, you just replace the idle control valve because you don't want it to come back. If it's your own personal car, well, hey, give it a try, give it a shot. The only person that you're hurting is yourself, if that's the case. Sometimes you get away with it. Sometimes it's one of those situations where, you ate the bar did not eat you type of thing. So there's always that possibility. But if anything I said here doesn't necessarily help you, I'd ask you to head over to my website, click on that article about idle issues. There's stuff specifically on Honda, both rough idle and low idle problems there that could potentially help you. And here's another one. John Shelton. I have a 1995 Integra. After I let off the gas when stopping, the idle drops extremely low with the belts almost stop spinning, and then it picks back up. Any idea? Well, same answer to you, Joe. Exact same thing. It's like I say, it's almost like clockwork. And a lot of times what I find is somebody's misadjusted that screw. And you know what? I should probably cover how to properly adjust that screw. In order to properly adjust that screw, you've got to bring the engine up to operating temperature. Then you actually unplug the idle air control valve, take it out of the circuit, and then you adjust the idle accordingly. Now, different vehicles have a different base idle setting, and it's usually way lower than you think. It's not like actual base idle. So sometimes it's like set it to 450 RPM or something like that. You have to consult the manual to your specific vehicle, but you need to unplug the idle air control valve when you do this so that the computer doesn't try to correct your work, because that's what will happen. It will try to correct what you're doing, and that's what you're doing. You're basically taking that component out of the circuit and you're setting a base idle. That's the way to do it properly. All right. Now, normally I just answer automotive questions here, but I'll answer this one really quick. Alex Clarkson. I just got hired to Chevy as an apprentice. I want to really impress them and stand out. Any tips? Good question. And the fact that you're asking that question says that, you know what, I'd hire you. The fact that you actually care about what you're doing. And the best advice I can give is shut up. Shut up and listen. The people that just listen. Now, even if you're apprenticing under somebody that, let's just say, maybe doesn't care about their job all that much, you can still learn something from them. There's still something to be gained there. But the biggest thing is when you first come in, you're full of this enthusiasm. You're full of all these ideas, and it's really exciting when you first start out as a technician. I remember I enjoyed the heck out of it. I really liked it. But you have to be careful, because the guys that have been there a while don't really want to hear it from you. And that's no offense to you. It's not saying you're not capable. It's just with automotive repair, if you're getting a job in this industry, you got to pay your dues. You got to put in your time. It's not something you can just pull out of a box and you're ready to go. Even if you graduated top of your class at school, which I did, I still had plenty to learn experience-wise after getting out. And it's not just the experience of actually performing the work. It's the experience of getting to know the work environment, getting to know what's cool, what's not cool, how to conduct yourself, how to handle yourself. And the best way to do that is to basically listen and watch what's going on around you. The less you try to make waves and the less you try to be, stand out. And I'm not saying don't stand out. Just basically do what you can to be the best technician you can be. And you can do that simply by observing, learning, and doing what you're told. And sooner or later, things will fall into place for you. So I wish you the best of luck with that. On to car questions. All right. Sorry, I'm sifting through here. Well, here we go. And we mentioned this earlier. Carlos Alvarez. What is your opinion on cold air intakes? K&N, question mark. Okay, well, I'll bite. All right, first of all, if your air filter is inside the engine compartment when you install your cold air intake, it's not a cold air intake. Think about it. Your engine compartment is hot. It's really hot. And it's 100 degrees or better. And you're drawing air from that 100-degree area and drawing it in. The stock setup draws in air from behind one of the wheel wells, away from the engine compartment. So if you're installing something that you're calling it cold air intake, and it's drawing in air from the engine compartment, it's a total fallacy. I laugh when I see it. I laugh when people call that a cold air intake. I literally laugh out loud. Ha! Well, other thing, if you want to install a proper cold air intake, you need to go down in behind a wheel well, away from the hot engine compartment to install it. However, if you do this and you, say for instance, drive through a deep puddle one day, you could suck up that water into your engine, hydrolock it, bend a connecting rod, or worse, break one, and that's it, game over. So you have to install, there's a special valve that you install in these that is sort of like a relief valve that prevents that water from being sucked up into the engine and destroying your engine. Now, is this worth it? Well, my friends over at Mighty Car Mods proved that it wasn't. And they made a great video. They put cars on dyno. It's a hotly contested thing. So many people, even the companies claim, horsepower increase or whatever. The only thing cold air intakes do, in my opinion, is make your engine louder, which sounds cool. And if that's what you're going for, and it makes, when you open up the hood and you see something like that, hey, that looks cool, it looks fast, it looks wonderful. All right, great. And I don't have a problem with that. But if you're expecting like 20 horsepower gains from these things, once again, I'm going to laugh out loud at you because really, I mean, you have to understand volumetric efficiency. And volumetric efficiency is basically what a naturally aspirated engine can draw in. There's a maximum amount of air that can move into that engine. Putting a different intake on it is not necessarily going to help with that at all. It's going to be probably the same. Yeah, well, it's going to be the same. It's not going to flow any better. The engineers spent a great deal of time making that air intake system work really well and give you performance and fuel economy because they want that. Actually, the better the engine performs, the better fuel economy it gets. Think about it. But they also want to keep it quiet. So that's why you have those like goofy bends that come off of those snorkels going into the engine and stuff. The reason why those are there is they're mufflers, so that they basically cancel out certain air pulses that are coming in that would normally make noise. Now you put that quote-unquote cold air intake on there, you don't have any of that. That's why your engine gets louder. That's why it seems to have more power. It seems to have more power. It's all about perception. In my opinion, cold air intakes are all about perception. Would I put one on my car? Maybe. Yeah, to have fun. And I told you, I'd take it from the inside the wheel well. I'd put in the valve so it didn't suck in water or anything, but I would do it with that in mind, knowing that I'm not necessarily going to get more horsepower. It'll just sound cooler, and that's what I'll go in it as. But as far as those things giving you all this horsepower, horse pucky is what I say. It just doesn't happen. It's not really physically possible. So cold air intakes, that's my opinion on that. All right, let's keep moving here. All right. Like diagram preferred. I'm trying to find one in particular, and I can't remember who asked it, but they had a truck that was having an issue. All right, well this one's good enough. We got Skidder 302. Eric, how do you tell the difference between a slipping torque converter and a slipping transmission? 1999 Ford Expedition feels like something is grabbing and letting go under plus 35% acceleration. By the way, your drive strip video was great. I had been waiting for that video for some weeks now. I really had a great time taking that car to the drag strip. But I'm kind of glad you asked this because there were actually a few people that had questions about Ford Ranger transmissions, and they were similar issues to where it would just sort of drop out. Now, I made a video about what was inside a torque converter, and really the only thing that can cause a torque converter to slip is the torque converter clutch. And the torque converter clutch basically works like a regular clutch that is applied at certain times. It just depends on the strategy and the type of transmission and that type of thing, but traditionally you would apply a torque converter clutch after you've gone through your highest gear. So if it's a 4-speed transmission, first gear, second gear, third gear, fourth gear, then torque converter lockup. It's traditionally how they did it. Now, newer strategies, they're using lockup a lot more. Reason being is because the torque converter slips by design. And the reason for that is when you're stopped at a stoplight, the engine still runs. If you did that with a manual transmission and you didn't push the clutch in, it would stall. You don't want that to happen with your automatic transmission, so they use the torque converter. And they use that to transfer power, but they not only transfers power, but it also drives the front pump of the transmission, which supplies the transmission with pressurized oil that it uses to activate everything. So the torque converter serves many functions. But when someone says, you know, I hear it a lot, you know, my torque converter is bad in my transmission slipping. No. Normally what you'll have with a torque converter clutch problem, there's a couple of problems. It can either start slipping itself, or it cannot stay applied correctly, and there'll be like a shudder during engagement, or it can cause issues. But a slipping transmission, it does not cause. That is a separate issue. Now, and some of the other questions that were Ford Explorer, I actually think the other ones were Ford Explorers that they were talking about, and some of those other ones, I would look at the ignition system, because many times under load is when your ignition will fail. So your spark plugs, your ignition coils, your wires, that type of thing. If you have a problem with acceleration, or going uphill, or whenever the engine's under a lot of load, that's when a lot of times I'll see the ignition system fail, and you'll get that kind of, your fish biting feeling is what you'll get. And I did a video on how to find voltage leaks. Basically, you spray around all the ignition components with water. And it's really fun in the dark, because sometimes you can actually see the sparks and the arcs leaking. So that is a possibility. Not to say that your transmission can't be a problem. And the first thing to do with a transmission or a suspected transmission problem is check the fluid level and condition. If it looks old, and I get asked this a lot, if it's been like 100,000, 80,000 miles since you've changed it, you're playing Russian roulette. You really are, because you could change the fluid and filter, and suddenly your transmission doesn't work anymore. I cover this in an article that I also put on my website, which I won't get into here. But the first course of action is if you have a situation like this and you suspect a transmission problem, first thing I do is a fluid filter change. And it's easy, it's a service, something needs to be done. If the behavior of the transmission changes, I know, aha, I've got something going on with the transmission. But as I said, you could be playing with a loaded gun, because if you do this, sometimes transmissions, if they haven't had a fluid change in a very long time, will not work after a fluid change. And I go in depth into that in that article that I wrote. So as far as how you tell the difference, you understand how they operate, and you also understand the strategy that they have. And really the best way to tell is to hook up a set of pressure gauges on the side of an automatic transmission. There's these little pressure points. And just like your engine has oil pressure, and an oil pressure, you take out like the sending unit or whatever, and you screw in the oil pressure gauge. I did a video on this not long ago. Same thing with a transmission, but usually the transmission oil pressure gauges might have like 3 different leads coming off of them, 3 different hoses you can plug into 3 different areas, and you can monitor these pressures. Then you look it up in the service manual and compare those pressures that you're seeing in that transmission as it operates with the specifications. And if those specifications are off, like there's a pressure loss or something like that, that could indicate that there's either worn components or a bad seal or something inside the transmission that is now allowing full hydraulic pressure to go to that clutch or band or whatever it's trying to actuate. That's how automatic transmission diagnosis is done. It's done with some pressure gauges and some scientific methods. Or you get a guy who's like rebuilt a couple hundred Ford transmissions and takes yours out for a drive and says, "Yep, transmission's bad." That guy can tell you, and he's probably right. He's probably right. He's done it a lot, so experience can weigh in heavy with a situation like this, quite heavy. All right, I'm going to try to sneak in one more here. Well, here's a quick one. Teddy Robinson, why are cars so much more complicated than necessary? Well, I would say that's a relative term. Chris Pondar, I have a question on fuel brands. Is it better to purchase fuel from a name brand station versus store brands like Costco and Kroger? Excellent question. I would say no. Some stations are, it depends on how they maintain their tanks, that kind of thing, but think about it. There are only so many refineries that are out there, and everybody buys from everybody else. So even though you may see Kroger on the front, Might be Shell gasoline. Same thing with Costco. They have to get it from somewhere because, as I said, there's only so many refineries that are around. So they can only pull it from so many places. Sorry. It's like engine oil also. Engine oil is the same thing. So many refineries to go around, and they use what they have. So they all buy from everybody else. Some gasolines will have more additives, that type of thing in them. They may have a different additive package where they put like some like Techron comes to mind, something like that, and that might make it a little more expensive. Doesn't make it better? Possibly. They've got science to prove that it makes it somewhat better, and that's why they're charging a little bit more for it. Sorry about that. I seem to have swallowed a bug. But anyway, aside from that, I'll try to get to one more, and then I'm going to try to sell you t-shirts again. We got Jacob Frey. What is your preferred way to combat battery terminal corrosion? I use felt wrap terminal protectors, and they seem to work great. How do those work anyway? Honestly, I see battery terminal corrosion a lot, except when it's a really good battery. And when I'm talking about really good batteries, I'm talking about like back in the late 90s or whatever, we used to get Panasonic batteries in for Hondas. You could put those on 8 years later, not a bit of corrosion on them, period. And you could install like, off-the-shelf brand, I'm not going to name names, install an off-the-shelf brand in the same car, put it in there, and the battery terminals corrode within like a year. And I say that's the way the battery's vented, the way it's constructed, the way it's made. And that oftentimes comes into play. Those battery felt things, yeah, okay. If they're working for you, they're working for you. I tried them. They didn't really do much for me. I'll say that I really hate those lead battery connectors that you crimp cables onto. Hate those things. I see lots of corrosion with those. I've seen lots of connection issues with those. Don't like those. I'm going to say to prevent it, battery maintenance from time to time. Go in there, a little baking soda and water, clean the top of the battery. Just clean them up. Go in there with a brush and clean up the terminals and clean up the connections and all that kind of stuff. That may be your best thing. But as far as prevention, oxygen gets in there. Also the chemicals in the battery, as I said, the way it's vented. Some of them are just worse than others. But good quality batteries usually mean a better way of doing things. All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for me this week. Once again, get your Eric the Car Guy t-shirts. Why? Because they're cool and awesome and only available for a limited time. And I'm wearing one myself, and I really like it. And I wouldn't try to get them to you if you didn't want them. But I often get asked about stuff like this. 21 bucks for guys, 22 bucks for girls. Let's see, what else? Thank you for watching. If I missed your questions this time, as I said, you can always go to EricTheCarGuy.com. It's available 24/7, 365. There's plenty of things there to help you with those automotive issues, and I do want to help you, including videos, all that stuff. I've tried to build my entire life around it and helping you with your automotive issues. That's why I do these live shows. And speaking of these live shows, next one's going to be, don't forget, Eric, June 4th, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard. So if you missed this show, you can do that one. I'll make announcements about it. You can post your questions early, that type of thing. I already told you about the shirts. Can't think of anything else to tell you other than I really appreciate you watching, and I will see you in a couple of weeks. So be safe, have fun, and of course, stay dirty. I'll see you next time.